This week, Congress divided over Iran war powers as the Trump administration escalates tensions in the Middle East. The Fifth Circuit advanced a detention policy towards Supreme Court review. Trade tensions intensified with tariffs on Canada and 60 nations, and a top official warned election administrators over voter roll procedures. The House voted Thursday to limit President Trump's authority to wage war in Iran, approving a war powers resolution that would force the administration to end military operations within 60 days, unless Congress authorizes continued action. The vote was 214 to 208, with 4 Republicans joining all Democrats in support. The Senate rejected the measure Friday in a 47 to 49 vote, leaving the administration free to continue operations without a congressionally mandated timeline. The conflict has killed 18 American service members and disrupted global oil supplies, driving gas prices above $4 per gallon. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated the 1973 War Powers Resolution is unconstitutional, a position the Trump administration has maintained throughout the escalating tensions with Iran. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld the Trump administration's mandatory detention policy for illegal immigrants, blocking 3 Texas District Court rulings that had ordered certain detained immigrants freed on bond. The stay, issued July 21st, now covers Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. The policy, established through a July 2025 memo, requires mandatory detention without bond for anyone who crossed the border illegally, making no exceptions based on time in the country or asylum applications. Assistant Attorney General Brett Shumate called the ruling precedential. Critics questioned that characterization. The legal landscape remains fractured, with 10 states' appeals courts finding the policy unconstitutional, while the 8th Circuit upheld it. The Supreme Court is widely expected to take up the question, potentially setting a binding national standard on detention procedures. President Trump will meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Tuesday, according to the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Netanyahu travels to Washington on Monday, with the visit timed to include attendance at a funeral service for Senator Lindsey Graham. The meeting was arranged after Netanyahu requested an appointment last week. The visit signals renewed coordination on Middle East policy as the administration weighs military options against Iran. No formal agenda has been disclosed, though discussions on military coordination and intelligence sharing are expected to dominate the talks amid escalating regional tensions. The Trump administration announced Monday it will impose a 50% tariff on certain Canadian goods effective next month, including hockey sticks, wine, and cement. The move affects roughly $20 billion in annual trade. Officials said the tariffs respond to what they characterize as Canadian discrimination against U.S. exports, citing Canadian auto policies favoring domestic production and dairy rules giving European cheese preferential treatment. The administration invoked Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, a provision never used before. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called the tariffs a direct violation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement and pledged to intensify negotiations. The decision reflects escalating trade tensions between the two nations and follows a Supreme Court ruling that limited the administration's emergency tariff powers. President Trump has announced new tariffs targeting 60 countries, citing forced labor practices. The duties, ranging from 10 to 12.5%, took effect at 12:01 a.m. ET on Friday, immediately raising costs for importers. The administration says the measure protects American workers and consumers from goods produced under exploitative labor conditions. The scope marks one of the broader single-round tariff announcements of the Trump presidency. The forced labor rationale draws on existing U.S. law, including the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act framework. However, applying that standard to 60 countries through tariffs represents a significant escalation compared with prior enforcement actions. Affected trading partners may challenge the action at the World Trade Organization, while domestic importers are expected to seek clarification on which specific goods and supply chains fall under the new duties. The The Trump administration is escalating pressure on state election officials, with Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin threatening criminal prosecution for those who refuse to comply with federal directives on voter roll audits and voting machine security. Mullin sent letters Friday to Secretaries of State in Nevada, California, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, alerting them to potential non-citizens on their voter rolls discovered during a DHS review. The administration is pursuing a two-track enforcement strategy: mandatory voting machine security upgrades with federal grant penalties for non-compliant states, and a national voter roll review using the federal SAVE program to check immigration status. However, a federal court ruled in June that using SAVE to verify citizenship on voter rolls was unlawful, creating immediate legal conflict. Election officials in targeted states now face pressure to implement these measures or risk federal investigation and prosecution. Arizona's primary elections on Tuesday advanced Trump-backed candidates in several high-stakes races. U.S. Rep. Andy Biggs won the Republican gubernatorial nomination, positioning him to challenge incumbent Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs. Biggs refused to certify the 2020 election results and cited President Trump's unverified claims of a stolen election. In Arizona's 1st congressional district, Trump-endorsed former NFL kicker Jay Feely won the Republican primary. The district is one of 2 nationally competitive House toss-ups located in Arizona. In the 6th congressional district, Republican Rep. Juan Ciscomani ran unopposed and will face Democrat Joanna Mendoza. The results signal the direction of the Republican Party in a battleground state expected to prove decisive in the 2026 midterms. The United States and Saudi Arabia have formalized a landmark nuclear cooperation agreement, enabling American companies to design and build a civilian nuclear power program in the kingdom. U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright and Saudi Minister of Energy Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman signed the so-called 123 agreement on Wednesday with President Trump's approval. The accord permits American firms to construct nuclear facilities in Saudi Arabia and authorizes a joint feasibility study on building a uranium enrichment facility within the kingdom. The agreement differs from traditional U.S. nuclear cooperation frameworks by not imposing the most stringent inspection requirements and by permitting uranium enrichment and reprocessing activities. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the pact remains consistent with non-proliferation commitments. Congressional approval is required before the agreement becomes final. The Supreme Court has removed legal barriers on campaign spending ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. On June 30th, the court issued a 6-3 decision striking down federal limits on how much political parties can spend in direct coordination with their candidates. The ruling follows the court's 2010 Citizens United decision, which eliminated restrictions on corporate political spending. Republican legal challenges drove the party coordination ruling. Campaign finance experts differ on its magnitude. David Kolker of the Campaign Legal Center said the decision gives parties more money to spend, while Brendan Glavin of OpenSecrets.org suggested the practical impact may be limited. The 2026 midterms will be the first full electoral cycle testing the effects of this ruling. Colt Gray, now 16, has pleaded guilty to charges of malice murder, weapons violations, and cruelty to children for a shooting at Apalachee High School in Winder, Georgia, in September 2024. 4 people were killed, 2 students and 2 teachers. Gray was 14 years old at the time of the attack. Evidence showed he spent months planning the shooting, with detailed drawings and notes recovered from his cell phone and notebook. His non-negotiated plea forfeits his right to a jury trial and appeal, making a sentence of life without parole likely. Gray's father, Colin Gray, was convicted in March 2026 for providing the rifle used in the shooting. His sentencing is scheduled for the following week. The case marks only the 3rd time in U.S. history a parent has been held criminally responsible for a mass shooting carried out by their child. A federal judge has invalidated FDA restrictions on Mifepristone, the most common medication used for abortion. U.S. District Court Judge Robert Ballou ruled Thursday that the Food and Drug Administration failed to adequately justify its 2023 restrictions and ordered them sent back to the agency for reconsideration. The ruling stemmed from a lawsuit filed by abortion providers in Kansas, Montana, and Virginia who challenged the restrictions as excessive and lacking scientific foundation. Judge Ballou did not establish a timeline for the FDA to complete its analysis. The decision aligns with a similar ruling from a Hawaii federal judge in October. Meanwhile, the FDA is conducting a comprehensive safety review expected to conclude within 6 months, according to Trump administration officials. Multiple competing lawsuits filed by state attorneys general continue advancing through federal appellate courts. More than 1,000 people gathered at Monument Square in Portland on Saturday to protest the fatal shooting of Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, a 25-year-old Biddeford resident killed by ICE agents on Monday morning. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed Guerrero was not the subject of the investigation. His widow, Carolina Rojas Alvarez, spoke to the press about the incident. Community leaders, including Sophia Khalid of Lewiston, framed the shooting as emblematic of broader pressures on immigrant communities. After speeches, protesters marched through downtown Portland towards Senator Susan Collins' office, calling out her voting record on immigration enforcement funding. Federal investigations into officer-involved shootings typically take several months, and results may shape future policy discussions about ICE operational standards. That's the week from the American Star News. For complete coverage of every story in this briefing, visit theamericanstarnews.com and subscribe so you never miss the weekly review.